You were doing the dance.
I was doing the dance.
I was going all zen there. I was going, breathe, just focus on my breath, just keep it nice and calm, nice and relaxed. How are you, Graham?
I'm good, thank you, Cuddy. How you doing?
Absolutely fantastic. Do you know what? I always get excited when we go live on the radio. I mean, I still to this day, it's like, oh, we've got a radio show.
It's awesome, right? It is awesome. Anyway, hey folks, how you doing? Good afternoon. Oh, hello. He's adjusting his camera.
I am adjusting my camera because I want to be in the middle.
You're going to be in the middle. You have to be center of attention, is what you're saying to me, Cuddy. Right?
Look, you know me far too. Look, I'm going to take ownership of that one, Graham. I'm going to take ownership. You know full well I like to be center of attention, and you know I like to say something.
You do. You do. So why don't you introduce us today, then?
Oh, thank you so much, Graham. Well, look, welcome to The Meanings of Life, our beautiful radio show, courtesy of MRS Men's Radio Station. Thank you very much to Russ, Kim, Cena, and the team for letting us go live every couple of weeks with the shows that we have. I'm one of your hosts today, one of your co-hosts. My name's Cuddy Cudworth, the proud founder and owner of Monkey Mind Relaxation. Check out the website. Get in contact however you want if you want to chat about anything. However, I am co-hosted today by the one, the only, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a drum roll. He's in the building. It's Graham Nicol!
What do I say after an introduction like that? Oh, my Lord. Good afternoon, Cuddy. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, folks. It's great to have you here. Yeah, my name is Graham Nichols. I am the owner of the Priority Academy, and if you want to learn anything about the helping industry, from life coaching and NLP to meditation, mindfulness, and a whole bunch of other stuff, then you can join that website just there. But anyway, that's enough of the advertising stuff. Let's get past that. Anyway, if anybody's out there and you want to drop us a comment, no matter where you're watching, we can see it and we'll say hi to you as you do. So what are we talking about today, Cuddy?
Well, today's show is the stories we create and how to break them. Now, I don't think I don't know if I was going to say I get triggered by certain things, but since becoming like a therapist or a coach or a helping practitioner, you become more and more aware of the stories that we create that keep us stuck and bound in a place of unhappiness, constant anxiousness, anxiety, and depression. And if I wanted this show to highlight that the stories that we create, as real as we feel that they are, if you change your perspective, you could look at the story from a different angle and think, hang on a minute, maybe it's not as bad as what I think. Maybe it's not as true as I believe it to be true. And maybe if we spoke to somebody or you watch this show, you'll be thinking, actually, if I look at what I'm saying internally with that monkey mind, you could start creating a different story and creating different outcomes in life. And it's something we're both passionate about, is creating a different outcome. So that was the whole kind of vibe for the show, Graham. And I when I said the title of the show, you perked up and went, "Oh, I like that one." So I was like, "There's a winner of a title of a show." So it's the stories we create and how to break them, Graham. That's what we're going to be talking about today.
Fantastic. And there's a particular quote, and it's also the name of a book that I absolutely love. It's by Wayne Dyer, and it says, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." And that is just so true. Whenever you change that story that you're talking about, when you change that story, then your life changes along with it. Because you're absolutely right. When you're in that story, whatever the story you're telling yourself, when you're in that, it feels absolutely real to you. I've been there. I do it, and probably still do it at some points in my life. Everybody does it. We're not saying it's something you're ever going to stop doing, but what you have to do is recognize those stories and then change the ones that are disempowering you. If it's empowering you, if it's making you stronger, if it's giving you a better life, then keep on with that story and keep going. But if it's disempowering you and holding you back and making you feel anxious or stressed or depressed or angry or frustrated, whatever it is, then there's no point keeping a hold of it. We all at some point in life feel that way, whether it be anxious or depressed or stressed, whatever. We all get to that place and we go and knock on the door, but it doesn't mean when the door opens we have to walk into it. We can turn around and walk back. We can experience it for a moment and go, do you know what? I'm not interested in that. And part of doing that is learning how to change those stories that we tell ourselves. And the stories that we're able to create as human beings, we are really story-making machines. And the stories we are able to create are just amazing. We can create something out of nothing. I'll give you an example from my life. for an awful long time. He's giggling at me now because he probably knows
No,
the
it's
example.
true because we can create stories from anything.
Absolutely. I had a really good friend. He was my best friend. He passed away about 4 years, or just over 4 years ago now. But for a long, long time, I really didn't take my business and really drive it forwards. And the reason being is because I had created this story that if I did that, somehow he would be annoyed at that and he wouldn't want to be friends with me anymore because I knew he wanted to start a business, but he wasn't really brave enough. He didn't really have it. He kept saying I would love to, but it's not within me. So I created this story that if I did that, he wouldn't like me anymore. We'd fall out. We were in a band together. The band had split up. I created all sorts of absolute rubbish until one day I said to him, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And he went, go for it. Oh, I'd love it. I've always wanted to do that, but I'm not brave enough. You were brave enough. That would be awesome. The story was complete and utter bull and created in there. So all of a sudden, I went out and created my own business and had his full support. But for so long, I held myself back because I created that utter rubbish story. I'm guessing you've got some stories that you've told yourself, Cuddy.
Do you know what? The unfortunate part of this is it's only an hour show, isn't it?
We could go on forever, couldn't we, talking about stories, just our own stories, let alone anything else.
So, and I'm stuttering because I'm like, look, it's the biggest part of that's monkey mind. We really are going to be touching on monkey mind and the conversations that we are the best storytellers. I don't think people realize how much our thoughts are not based in fact, are more fiction, are based in what's happened in the past, and we create a whole new story. And we become the best Roald Dahls. We do. I used to do it.
Hi, Veronica, by the way.
Oh, Veronica! Do you know, at one point I was thinking, I can't believe Veronica has left us. She's not come into the show. I was absolutely devastated. You're the one person, Veronica.
Every time we're here, you're here. And we don't pay you a penny either.
No, absolutely not. And the thing is, it's that internal chatter, that conversation that we have that comes from so many of our past, so much of our past, so much of, oh, well, I feel like this, so it must be true. That's something that's really big. And I know we have to give people the space for those feelings, but you also have to say, is that really true? Because we can often say, well, I'm feeling, this today, and I'm feeling this today. And that's what really we sit with that feeling sometimes. And I'm like, I always try and challenge the way that I'm feeling, especially if I'm tired. There's those days that I have those days where I want to be tired and relaxed, not a problem. But once they start happening more and more, you have to start questioning. And you hear it a lot in conversations, right, Graham? You hear it a lot in a conversation. Oh, well, absolutely. I just feel... One of the biggest ones that I've had is, I feel like my parents didn't love me as much as my other sibling. I always felt like there wasn't the same connection. Now, just because we felt it, that doesn't mean to say it's true. But what we can do with our focus is we can start, because we feel it, we can kind of want to prove that negative feeling true. And then that really makes that become a story and a belief of, oh, well, I'm feeling it, so it must be true, because I'm going to look for reasons why I feel like shit today. Why do I feel, I said shit in the afternoon. I do apologize. So I feel like I feel bad. So I feel bad this afternoon, so I'm going to look for reasons why I feel bad instead of trying to... New phone and internet is freezing. Do you know, we were just saying our internet's not that good either for Veronica. Our internet's not the best. I don't know if there's a challenge with the internet today. So we challenging the way that we feel has to be a really helpful tool to anyone that gets to watch this live or on catch up. Is challenging the way that we feel. And that's something that I wanted to make people really, really aware of, is once we start saying, I feel this, we can start looking to prove that correct, even though it's a negative thing.
Yeah.
Once you start proving that negative feeling true, you've created a story that might not be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? Yeah, absolutely. And one of the stories I think so many people use, and it sounds like just a small story, and my daughter started using it, and I had to kind of say to her, is this just a story? Because something would go wrong first thing in the morning. She goes, oh, it's gonna be one of those days.
Yeah.
And you just, that's the story created straight away. Because then the moment something else goes wrong, and let's be honest, never has there been a day where nothing went wrong. It happens, I mean, it's life. But if something goes wrong, even no matter how small, and you go, oh, it's going to be one of those days, and then something else goes wrong, oh, see, I told you it was going to be one of them days. And then you put yourself in this whole feeling mode of it's going to be one of those days. And all of a sudden you feel like that for the whole day. It's a story you've created. No, that little thing that went wrong before, and then you said it's going to be one of them days, didn't mean it's going to be one of those days. It just meant something went wrong. You know, it could be you knocked a can of deodorant off the shelf, and you have to pick. Oh, it's going to be. No, all it was something happened, and you had to deal with it. Now get on with it. But it's just that story you tell yourself about it's going to be one of them days that makes you feel that way. Are you shushing?
No, I'm not shushing.
Did you just give me a shush?
No. That was me poignantly thinking this is where I'm going to jump in, because this is the whole premise to the meanings of life, ladies and gentlemen. It was the meanings and the stories that we create that start becoming true, real, and our beliefs. And that's what's the premise about this. That today's show was the beliefs that we have, and you use that absolutely perfectly there. And I'll use the story of I used to wake up in the morning and I used to say, do you know what? Today's going to be the best day in the world. Today, I've read a book. It says you're going to be positive. And that's why, you know, the whole premise of positivity and a positive mindset is such a weird thing to try to grasp for a lot of people. Because when you are desperate and you're thinking, well, I see all the Facebook quotes and I said, just stay positive, just think positive. It's not about that. And I've always talked, I think we mentioned this in one of our podcasts a long time ago, Graham, when I said a positive mindset is when there's nothing to support you having anything positive in your life, it gives you the focus to find something to get you out of that downward spiral, that story that you're in. And that's what a positive mindset is. It's not about thinking positively, even though it does work. It's not about everything's roses and rainbows. No, it's not. It's about having realistic expectations. So like I said, going back to the original story, I used to wake up saying, right, today is going to be the best day in the world. I'm in charge. By 9:30 in the morning, something's happened and it's pissed me off. And for the rest of the day, I've let that bother me. And that's my, I didn't understand, but that was my accountability. That's on me. So when I do get to meet people and I see people and with all the fabulous people that I do work with, I absolutely commend every one of my clients and customers that say, do you know what? Something's not right. I need to work on it. Let's get past it. And I'm like, do you know what? Fair play to you, because there's so many in the world don't realize sometimes how easy it can be to break those stories once we're willing to let go of something that's really been held dear to us. And sometimes when we're in pain, we again, it's that focus of looking to prove that pain correct instead of challenging it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you made a really key distinction there between positive thinking and positive mindset. I don't really believe in positive thinking, but I do believe in positive mindset. Because a positive mindset, as you said, is when when you feel like there's nothing to be positive about, your positive mindset is about then looking for what you can be positive about or be grateful for, or of that. A positive thinking is about going out in your garden and going, there's no weeds in my garden, and there's weeds because that's what happens. You know, you can't help it. It's like saying, I'm happy. It just doesn't. Positive thinking doesn't work. Positive mindset is where you absolutely need to be, and I love that distinction.
The positive mindset, and this is I use when I do this actually in the courses that I do, the life courses, those things, and I always say you have to change your expectations, lower your expectations. Have actually, instead of the expectation of everything's perfect, everything's fine, and by 9:30 in the morning, it's not. You've got to change that perspective to today could be a bad day, but I'm good with that because I've got the tools to get through it. Today could be a bad day. It could rain all day. I could lose my job. Something else could go wrong. I'm all right with it because I know I've got the tools to get through, and I've got that. That's a positive mindset, is having those tools to be able to get through the day when it absolutely goes wrong. When you get a flat in your car on the way to work, you're driving, you're sat on a bus and someone at the side is doing something really loud and annoying and those kind of things. These are the things that just can I'll my whole man's up to this. I was the person that something would go wrong at 9:30 in the morning. And that was it for the rest of the day. That bothered me. Bothered me. And I didn't understand that was my responsibility to let that go.
Yeah. I think part of having a positive mindset is about wishing for the best, but preparing for the worst. Expecting the best, but preparing for the worst. You expect things to go right, have a great day, but prepare for the fact that that's not always going to happen. Some days you're going to have poor days. I can be as positive. I believe. I'm an upbeat person. I have loads of energy, but some days life just sucks, and you just have to have the tools to get through that. You just have to go, okay, today, I'm going to do my best to. You have to work harder in them days. Some people say, oh, it's going to be a really bleak day today. I'm just going to leave it. For me, it's those bleak days that you have to work harder at it, and that's when you really step forward. Veronica's just said that Facebook's peed her off that much. She's now onto YouTube. Thank you for diving across. Dave, hi Dave, how you doing? We like to prove ourselves right. We do indeed, Dave. We do like to prove ourselves right, and most of the time we can find proof in anything, even if that proof doesn't exist, can't we? Absolutely.
Oh, Dave, he's absolutely right, and that's one of those things. So actually, now. So I always try and come from a place of experience, because when you're not working, because it's different when clients come to you, you know that you've got that space to be able to say, well, have you tried doing this? Have you tried doing this? Have you tried doing this? Let's do this. And when you've got clients there, they're like, all right, I'll try that. I'll try that. It works. It's brilliant. They get back in contact with you a week later. They say, oh my God, I started doing this and I started doing this and now it all works and now I'm having much better time. Yeah, obviously that brilliant. Perfect. So Graham, and I don't know if I'm looking for tips, but how do you look at those eyebrows raised? How do you deal with it with people who are not your clients, could be family, close friends, and you just listen to them keep repeating the same stories? At what point do you walk away or offer solutions or keep? What is it that, without getting you're quite condescending? No, not condescending. I just want to give you this option that might find really helpful. Because
it depends on who it is. It's the honest answer to that. Paul and my wife and I, we have a very open relationship in terms of conversation. So we will tell each other anything. And if one of us is being, particularly arsey or anything, we'll go, hang on a minute, what's going on there? And we'll be. But for me, anybody outside of that, if they actually want the help, then obviously I'm going to help. But if they're just using story after story after story, I'm not going to. It's not in my place. It's not my place to dive in and say to them, "Are you sure that story is correct? Are you sure that story is true?" Because stories become part of our lives, and they become part of the book of our lives, if you like. And sometimes breaking that story down before somebody's ready to break it down can be quite dangerous, because then you don't have the opportunity to replace it with what might be the truth. So if you try and dive in with somebody, if somebody's really, really struggling with, it doesn't really matter what they're struggling with. If they're really, really struggling and you try and take that story away from them, they're gripping onto that story really tight, because that's the one thing that gets them through the day. Even if it's a negative, disempowering thing, it gets them through the day. It has to be their choice to want to change. And then you can start looking at that story and what they can replace it with. If you just try and break that story down, you might as well be taking the foundations away from the house. It's all going to crumble in on you.
Yeah, and that was the second part of the show as well, which is we want to give people the tools to be able to change those stories. So, I mean, and again, we can Dave, if you want to share some of your stories, you're more than welcome to. Veronica, have you had any stories that you've happened to you in the past, and have you changed that story? Absolutely right, and share your stories with us, because that's one of those empowering things to do, is to share your stories so that it empowers other people to change. Because you say, this is where I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this is where I am now. And that's one of those positive things. So the stories that we create, for a lot of our listeners, that stories come from what have happened to us in the past. And a lot of the beliefs, and I don't know if people are aware of limiting beliefs and those beliefs that we have, and we can certainly touch on limiting beliefs in this show and things like that. And you touched on it if you've got your daughter and she says, "Oh, it's going to be one of those days," where would that story have come from? If you don't mind my asking, Graham, knowing you, how I think I know you, where would that story have come from? Because that's not a story that you would tell. So where would your daughter have heard or created that story?
Well, it could have come from anywhere. It could have come from, I mean, she's left school now, but it could have come from when she was at school. You know, kids get into habits that their parents not teach them, but they witness in their parents. So somebody
Modeling.
at school has said, yeah, they model their parents, and then they go to school and they say it, and then friends pick up from friends and model their friends. So it could have come from there. It could have come from my daughter's dad. She's technically my stepdaughter, so could have come from her dad. He might say it. The business that she's in. She sees lots and lots of people. So again, it doesn't really matter where it's come from. What the key is that when she says it to me, or when she was saying it to me, I would say, "And how do you know it's going to be one of those days?" And she would say, "Well, because that's just happened." I said, "So that one incident is just going to destroy the rest of the day?" And she'd sort of look at me very strangely and give me some weird faces, and then kind of realize that that was just one isolated incident. It's like when she used to talk about fear because she rides horses and stuff, and she would talk about the fear of falling off because she's fallen off a couple of times. And I get into the point where when she starts talking about fear, I go, "So where does fear come from?" And the first time she looked at me and she's like, "I don't know. Well, it comes from things happening." I said, "Does it come from things happening in the future then?" And she said, "Well, yeah." I said, "But how do you know they're going to happen?" And it's a story she created that she might get on a horse and she might fall off. But it's not the truth. You know, I have no idea. She has no idea that if she gets on that horse, she's rode hundreds and hundreds of times and not fallen off. But the story comes from that one time or those couple of times where she has fell off. And of course, it's not pleasant to fall off and you bump to the floor. And one time she fell off and the horse stood on her hand and she ended up in casualty. But because of those are minor traumatic events, all of a sudden there's a story builds up and fear builds up. But now we get to the point where she starts out and I say, "So where does fear come from?" And she knows that fear comes from in here. We create the fear. And if we carry that story on, then we get to the point of making that real for ourselves. If you get onto a horse and think, "I'm going to fall off, I'm going to fall off, I'm going to fall off," guess what you're going to do? It's just like if you're going into a job interview and you say, "They're not going to give me the job anyway. They're not going to give me the job. They're not going to give me the job." They're never going to give you the job because you're just not going to walk in there with confidence. It's the same with absolutely anything. Those stories that we repeat over and over again, we will absolutely make true. You know, if you were to go weightlifting, because I know you're a weightlifter, Cuddy, I know you like to pump the old iron, but if you were to look at a set of weights and go, "I'll never lift that, I'll never lift that, I'll never lift that," you're never going to. But if you look at it and say, "Do you know, I might not be able to lift that today, but I'm going to work at lifting that tomorrow or the next day," eventually you're going to be able to lift it. But if you just keep saying to yourself, "I'm never going to lift it," you never will, because you are just telling yourself that story time and time and time again, and your mind's going to go, "Oh, he doesn't want to lift it. Fair enough." And that's, I think, how they develop is where they develop from other people, they develop from our life experiences, they develop from the things that have happened to us. Oftentimes they develop from the bad things because we tend to remember the bad things that happen to us better than we do the good things. Is that your experience too?
Well, you're touching there on the negative. We've talked about this, the negativity bias of the brain. The brain has a negativity bias and it has to remember what's caused you pain so that it thinks, "Don't do that again." So a positive intent, we talked about, it's a survival mode. The brain's purpose is to keep you alive. So it is a survival, it's a positive intention. But that positive intention doesn't serve you well now. So we have to retrain. It's called retraining the brain. It's not retraining the brain. The brain does everything it's supposed to do. But if your thoughts and those conversations and your monkey mind, this side, I think, let me just give it. There it is, the monkey mind. If your monkey mind is insecure and jumping around and starting to say you're useless, you're no good, you can't do this, you're creating a story. Now, your brain doesn't and your mind doesn't know any difference between a thought and what's happening to you, really. We know this. There's no judgment from the mind. So
Absolutely.
those thoughts and that programming is really, really, really serious to you. It just goes in and it is coding your every sensibility and everything that's coming in. That's what creates that meaning, is from your belief systems, from your past experiences. It creates this story that becomes real. And this is the thing is, but what is happening, especially so much now, and I think we should. I've been watching it. I don't normally watch the news, Graham, but I'd love to touch on the fact that I watched the news this morning, and it looks like that maybe over the winter, and this is why I think we should do a lot more, Graham, with our shows and things like that, we could be going back down to another lockdown. They said that there could be some lockdowns happening in some kind of way because of the COVID cases. So you think about people's stories they're going to start creating there. So there's no wonder that mental health is going to take a dip. Anxiousness and anxiety is going to go through. Depression is going to go through the roof. And that's why the beauty of these radio shows is we've got these chances to be able to say, actually, and I'm going to throw out a tip straight away, a massive tip that is, and I'll tell you something that I don't know if I've ever shared this story with you, and it happened to us because I didn't know how the brain worked. I didn't know how those conversations worked and how anxiety was caused by the brain looking for solutions. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Boom, close down, panic, anxiety. Right? So it was basically focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. So that was my hashtag all last year through the lockdowns and everything. And that's when all the gyms closed and all those kind of things. And I told you, I created a gym on my backyard. I found some tires on a beach just because I saw somebody using tires. And I thought, my wife still thinks it looks like Steptoe's yard. And she's like, when are you getting the tires? She does. She says, when are you getting rid of the tires? I'm like, I'm not, just in case. I might need those tires.
Are you creating a story?
But it's a positive, empowering one, though.
It is.
And you touched on it. If you can, I would wholeheartedly, and I think The Rock, if you ever watched The Rock, the TV program, Young Rock, and his dad used to, I think it was called Play the Shtick. And it was play the story. Even though it's not real, play the story that you are powerful, rich, no. And he told you about all those stories, and that's what The Rock did. He played the shtick, and look at what The Rock is now. So you can absolutely, what you said, if you want to create, that's the power of thought. We know this, and that's not just a Wayne Dyer thing. There's so many teachings that the power of thought. If your monkey mind is not working with you, and you're not working in tandem with your monkey mind and understand how to differentiate with those conversations that you're going to have internally up here, and trust me, especially when I'm talking about gentlemen as well, is a lot of the times we don't realize that conversation that we're having, first of all, is our voice. It's not schizophrenia. It's not so many different things that we create these stories. It's our thoughts, it's our conversations that are ours, and we can take back control of once we understand it. But we didn't learn these things in school in any way whatsoever, did we, Graham?
No, absolutely not. And I think the important point is there that even when you take back control of it, it will still try and tell you a whole bunch of rubbish, and that's what you say. There is a negative bias to the mind. It's why we remember negative things so easily, and yet we struggle to remember sometimes the positive things. To remember something positive, we need to get so emotionally involved in it that we remember it. I can remember going to Bon Jovi concerts and stuff like that because I'm emotionally involved. I'm singing along. I'm giving it some of this, and you're completely fully involved in it. But are there other, positive emotions, positive emotive times that I can remember? Not quite so well, because I might have just been sat there and it might have been enjoyable, an enjoyable meal out with my wife or something. But because I'm not fully involved in it and celebrating through it, but when a negative event happens, we feel it all come smashing down on us, don't we? I remember having a car accident on the M25 because I remember it exactly. I can remember where I was, what I was looking at, looking in the rearview mirror, seeing this van coming from behind me. I can even picture the bloke who was on his bloody phone texting while he was driving and smashing into the back of me. But I can remember that because the emotion immediately is fear that he's going to belt into me, and then the emotion of, my God, what's going to happen? Is the car going to go up or whatever? Such an emotional event that I can remember it, but we don't have that emotional attachment to some of the positive things. So our mind is always going to try and force through that negative stuff. It's whether we can say, I'm not interested in that, thanks very much, move on. Or whether we just take it on.
Yes, you've 100% you've nailed it. I know Veronica's saying something because absolutely, but I do want to touch on that is the brain doesn't remember the positive because there was no pain. There's no pain to the pleasurable experience.
Yeah, absolutely. There's
So it's not,
yeah, great way
geared,
to put
it's
it.
not geared to remember pleasurable experience because there was no pain and there was no fear of death.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very much the pain pleasure principle. Every single human being wants to move away from pain and towards pleasure, but we will always do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. So if we have a choice, and it's equal, it's a bit like you use the pendulum.
I
If
always use the
pain's
thought
one,
pendulum. Yeah.
yeah. So if pain's one side and pleasure's the other, we will always do more to avoid that pain than we will to get to that pleasure.
But
If it's a seesaw, the pain will always win over the pleasure.
But that's the avoidance. And this is what most people don't realize when we're talking about is whatever you're trying to avoid, you're actually looking for subconsciously. So you're thinking about it, looking at it, because you're trying to avoid it. So you're bringing more of that into your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, where it's an old saying, where focus goes, energy flows. If you're trying to avoid the pain, your focus is on that pain, then you're absolutely gonna keep finding more of it. The solution to a problem is never in the problem itself. If you keep focused on the problem, all you're gonna see is the problem. But the solution is never in the problem. The solution is way over here somewhere, and not in the problem.
And I think it's the old adage, obviously, that we always say that we look at the. I always remember Einstein. Einstein used to look at, he gave the problem an hour, and he'd look at the problem for 55 minutes. He'd look at the problem 55 minutes, then he'd look for solutions in 5 minutes, and he'd say, right, let's use those solutions instead. Just that was his simple premise on it. Veronica says, watching a guy go through rehabilitation after major stroke. Wow, the brain is so complex, and most know they do. He can sing a song word for word, but get the spoken word out. Wow, obvious, absolutely, Veronica. And you've got the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain. You've got these different functions, and they all. I mean, they still say, and again, don't quote me on this, but is it something like 90% of the brain we don't understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of the brain we don't understand yet. We can map the brain and the digital mapping and all that sort of. But do we actually know how it works? Do we actually know where a thought comes from? We know that the brain is a whole bunch of electrical pulses, but where does a thought actually come from? How does that enter your brain and become words and then move on? Where does it come from? You want to go really deep here?
Oh no,
really deep.
No. That's I love that question.
Yeah,
I'm writing it down because I'm like, maybe that needs to be one of our future shows. Where
the trouble is, we could discuss it for a few hours, but the truth is we don't know. The top scientists of the world don't know where a thought emanates from. It's a bit like an acorn turning into a whacking great tree. How does that little thing that big contain a whacking great tree in it? We just don't know these kind of things. We don't know where a thought comes from. They just appear in our heads, and it's at that point we have a choice whether we take them on or whether we just go, yeah, thanks very much, and move on. But you want to talk about we don't know much of the brain. How on earth does it get there in the first place?
Yeah.
What do we really know about the unconscious mind and how that works? We know that the unconscious mind keeps our heart beating thousands of times a day, but do we really know? We know that everything we've experienced in life is stored in there somewhere, but do we know why? Do we know where that comes from? Do we know why it's in there? You really want to go really deep here, my lord?
This is deep. And Veronica's like, whoa, fellas. Whoa. She's not. But that's some deep conversation there. So the how can we break these stories? Now, I would like to throw out one of the stories that something that I use is the three positions. I look at the problem from my point of view. I look at a story.
I thought you were going down a completely different route there with positions, Scuddy. I've got to be honest. I really can't.
At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Graham
I was
Nichols.
Going to say no.
There's so much I'm learning about you today, Graham Nichols. I've just learned that you've got a tattoo on your arm, Graham Nichols.
I have that one. Yeah.
Hi.
A couple up there as well.
Wow, Graham! I never had you down for being a tattoo kind of guy. That's absolutely fantastic.
I was a rock god.
Hey, if that's the story you created, that's not a problem.
Yeah, it was, mate. I tell you, I was a rock god. But there you go. Anyway, yeah, back to your positions.
But before we go to the positions, that's depression as well. It's the story that we create can create the depression. So the story I had, she said Veronica's just telling the story of this guy. So the story I was telling myself was I didn't have something that I thought I deserved. And the second you go into I don't have, you are pretty much going to start edging towards that downward spiral. You're creating that pattern, that story. I didn't have, I don't have, I don't have, I don't have. Your brain starts hearing, I don't have, I don't have, I don't have. All right, we don't have anything. Why, my God, that's a good start to many sides of depression.
Yeah, so and it should also be on the cover of your book, shouldn't it? Because if you're going to start a story, I don't have is the great way to start the story of taking you down there, right?
Pretty much, because that's and that's why I genuinely love neurolinguistic programming, is because if you can understand and use and change the way that you speak and understand the way that the brain works, 100% you'll start getting yourself out of those funks. If you don't want to work with other people and things like that, it's a phenomenal tool to use. So
three positions anyway.
The three positions when looking at a problem and changing the perspective is I have look at from my point of view, I look at it from someone else's point of view, the other person's point of view, and I always look at it from the third person, which is looking at both sides. Then you can start changing your perspective. Absolutely, observing a challenge that you have from three different perspectives will give you a phenomenal tool to be able to, right, this is my problem. This is how I feel my problem is. Now, how would somebody else feel about this problem? That would be two positions. Then I would look at it from another outside, looking in on the 2 points. So you've changed your position at looking at that problem, and you've got a different perspective. You've got three different emotional connections to that story. Then you pick the one that's going to empower you, or it's going to change that emotional state, such as depression or anxiety. That's a phenomenal tool that I still use to this day on problems and things that I'm feeling and all those kind of things. So hopefully that would generally give someone some massive help to say, actually, is what I'm feeling true? Is it real? Is there another way I could look at this so that I could have a better outcome? That would be something quite simple you could use to start changing the way that you would feel. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think that looking at the truth, is it true? And is the proof that I'm looking at the whole story? Or am I just looking at the bits that prove that this is true? Am I, there's a whole bigger side to the story. So is it true? It would be a way I would certainly start. And then I'd be looking at the questions you're asking in that story. So you were talking about I don't have. So the question would probably be, why don't I have it? Why does that person have it and I don't? Why don't I deserve that when I feel I do? All of those questions just create that story, and they keep building the story. And all of a sudden, with every question, you've got a whole new chapter to the story that is just filling up until you've got a whacking great thick book like Encyclopedia Britannica, or however you say that. But the moment you change the question, you change that whole storyline. So instead of why don't I have that, if you change the question is how can I get that, all of a sudden there's a different story there. Why does he have it and I don't? Well, how can I make sure that I get the same as him? It's a whole different question, and it gives you such different options, and it's such a different storyline then, because instead of going, well, because clearly he's better than me and I'm not worthy and I don't deserve it, to the story changes to, well, maybe he's working a bit harder or a bit smarter than I am, so I need to do that as well. All of a sudden, it's a different story altogether, and a more positive and empowering one. We live by our stories, so we might as well have positive and empowering ones, because that's where they're going to take us in life.
Absolutely. And looking at another phenomenal tip, it would be looking at the story that you've created and absolutely changing it to be, you mentioned questions. The one thing that I live and literally die by now is, if everything has a positive intention, what's one positive I can take away from this shit day? So what's happening to me right now, whether it's I've lost my job or I've lost my partner or whatever, there's going to be loss somewhere. What one positive thing can I take away? One, that's it, and build on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand that everything has a positive intention, because some things seem so bad that, how can they have a positive intention out of it? But if you look deep enough, and if you can get your mind into the practice of looking deep enough, then somewhere inside you can find a positive intention for everything. I remember back in the days when I was employed, I got made redundant 4 times in the space of 10 years. And the first 3 times, they destroyed me. And, I had to go, I would be driving and going, oh, God, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to put food on the table? Where am I going to find another job? All of those sorts of things. The 4th time, I remember that the positive intention was, that's it, I'm never having another job again. I'm going to be working for myself. Nice. And that was my positive intention. That somewhere along the line, the world or the universe or whatever was trying to give me a message. Hang on, I've made you redundant 3 times now, and you're still going to get another bleeding job, and you're still in that same industry when you don't really want to be in it, but you think you don't know anything different, but you love coaching, so I'm going to throw a 4th time at you. Are you going to learn this time? And I did. I remember driving home. I remember the 2 thoughts in my head as I drove home that day was, 1, they're not going to beat me. And 2 was, I'll never work for anybody again but me.
Yeah.
And that was it. My journey home that day was completely different to the journeys home the 3 other times I've been made redundant, because I knew I was creating my own story by saying, you're not going to beat me, because that's a story in itself. That's a positive story in itself. You will not beat me. I don't care if you've made me redundant. I don't care if you think I'm not wanted at your business. You won't beat me. You won't put me down. And the second story is, and I will never work for anybody again, because while I'm working for me, then I decide what I do. If I get made redundant from me, that's my fault, not anybody else's.
And how many times have you been laid off?
Not once. I've come close a couple of times. I really have, but not once have I been laid off.
I nearly got fired on Thursday.
I've nearly been fired a couple of times, I tell you.
That's absolutely brilliant. So that's the power of the tools that you can learn and really get you moving forward in life. It's when you get stuck in, and look, I had a little bitch me moment the other day. I had a little bitch. I always call it little bitch me when I know that little bitch me pops up, which is that little neediness, that little bit woe is me, the little bit nothing's going right for me today, and I was like, oh, ho, ho, there he is, and I go back to the coding, to the, well, that's not really going to end well for the rest of it if I carry on in this state. So you mentioned it before. I knocked on the door. I think I'd worked out. It's always if I'm tired, if I've not slept well enough the night before, or if I've overtrained at the gym, I can be a little bit crabby the day. Or if I've not eaten in the right foods, I can be a little bit crabby and stuff like that. So I had a little bitch me moment, and I was about to text my wife with a little bitch me moment statement, and then I was like, no, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to write that down. I'm gonna walk away from that. What did I do to get myself back right? I did a meditation, obviously, because meditation grounds me every time. And then I started looking for, actually, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. So that little bit, I noticed when little bitch me is coming up. It's about that self-awareness. So hopefully that'll help for anyone. But breaking those stories can be hard, but it can also be one of the most powerful things that you can do. And perspective is a massive thing.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I can possibly say about breaking those stories is recognize when they're unconscious stories that you've been repeating time and time again. Make them conscious and then consciously choose to change them. We don't really think about where that conscious and unconscious bias comes from. And yet the unconscious will throw us this story, and then the conscious will take it on and just use it. But if they're in that moment where the unconscious goes, here, have that story again, you go, hang on, I recognize that story. Just like you recognize little bitch me, I recognize that story. I don't want it anymore. I'm going to consciously choose this. That is when your mind That's the positive mindset, isn't it? That we were talking
It
about
is.
way at the start of the show. That's the positive mindset of going, no, I don't want that story today. I want to choose something different. And then that story will come up again. Your conscious mind will go, oh, there you go, have that one. And you'll go, no, I don't want that story. And eventually your unconscious mind will go, no, I won't throw that today.
Because it's like,
And your
well,
conscious mind has replaced the pattern. I'm not saying it will never come up again, because it will. You've played that story, that pattern so many times that it will come up again. But it won't come up as often because you're battering down the pattern and you're placing a new pattern in there going, no, I'm not interested. I want this story instead. Because this is more positive, empowering. It fills me with joy or excitement or gratitude or love or whatever. That's the pattern to create.
Yeah. It really is. And that ability to be able to, I suppose, has to play a big part in this. You have to want to make those changes. And I think most people, there's a vision of change is hard. And I think one of the most common things to say, but it's a really good thing, is which hard do you want? Because yes, change can be hard. I agree with that when it comes to dieting or losing weight or stopping those unfortunate habits that so many people. Change is hard, and there's going to be not just a cognitive difference. There's going to be that different feeling within yourself. If you clearly, let's use sugar. If you're going to stop eating sugar for a week, your body's used to a amount of sugar, so you're probably going to get headaches. You're probably going to start getting jitters because your body's had something, and that new feeling is not going to be pleasant, is it? So any kind of change you have to go through, it's going to change. Whether it's cognitive difference, it's going to change. It's going to feel different, and it's going to feel unpleasant. And I know that's where the story get comfortable with the uncomfortable. If you can get comfortable with the uncomfortable, then it can be such a powerful thing for you to do. It really is. But in any kind of change, there's going to be resistance. Once you're comfortable with that uncomfortable, that resistance becomes less, and that new feeling is actually what you should be feeling. It's just your body's and your brain's not been used to it for such a long time. So when you start breaking those stories down and you make those changes with whoever you work with to get those changes, you can start feeling different. It's not always comfortable, but that new will become your new comfortable, and that's what most people spring back to, those bad habits and those bad stories. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll use the same analogy that I did earlier for your weight training. If you get to a point where you're lifting a weight and you're all right, it's still a bit hard, but you can lift it and you can do that with it. You then put it down and put another 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 kilos on. All of a sudden, then it's uncomfortable, isn't it? To lift that, you have to really strain to do it. But then if you do it often enough, it's going to get to the point again where you can do that. It's just how the muscle works. Well, the brain works exactly the same way. If you repeat that uncomfortableness time after time after time, the positive uncomfortableness, that becomes easier to get through. It's exactly the same as weight training. You just do it over and over again. And the one thing I always remember, I can't even remember who said it now. It might have been a Tony Robbins thing. He always used to say, if you're weight training, you've got it on the heaviest you can possibly lift, and you do 10 repetitions of lifting it. It's so heavy. Which one gives you the most benefit? And it's number 11 that gives you the benefit, not number 10, because you've pushed yourself that little bit further.
Yeah.
And that's how the brain works as well. Just when you're right at the edge and you think you can't push that positive story even more, push it again, because that's when you'll make the breakthrough. And the breakthroughs are the bit that are so important to us. We can break through that old story into a new story. We change our entire lives.
Yeah. I'm reading Veronica's comments. Veronica's all over it today. Getting right involved in the conversation.
Yeah, we also get older and things get clearer. I agree with that. Yeah, if I knew what I know now at 18, I would be, my life would be so much different.
But that's a story. So let's use that. But if you hadn't gone through your toughness,
then I wouldn't be who I am today.
That's the thing, is if you can, and that I think it is a Tony Robbins. God, we've been throwing Tony Robbins around today, but what if your worst day was actually your best day?
Absolutely.
What if that breakdown was actually a breakthrough?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that if I hadn't gone through being diagnosed with depression and stress and anxiety all at the same time, then I wouldn't be doing what I do today, because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have then gone on to find out as much as I could about them to help myself, and then gone on to help others with them, and
Yeah.
then become a coach, and then now train coaches. I just wouldn't be doing it. If you hadn't gone through what you went through when
Yeah.
you went through depression and that sort of stuff, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now. I have no doubt about that.
I wouldn't have been prepared for such a drastic change in circumstances that happened to me. What, 18 months ago? If it hadn't, because that was obviously lost the job and everything like that, and just took it in a stride. I'm like, this is a good thing. It was just the weirdest thing, but 10 years ago, that would have been a massive spiral. And it's because of the hard times that we've gone through. If you can get out of it and you start realizing, do you know what? I needed to go through those horrible times to get to the good times. And that's a phenomenal thing. That's how you reframe your past. Because I don't go back to the past. I'm sure you're the same as well, Graham. I'm not one for going back to the past. I don't really get upset about much in the future. I don't get anxious about things. I just try and stay in the moment and plan for the future. Planning is great. But I very rarely look back to the past, because it's happened and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And it keeps getting thrown up. But you did this in the past. You did this in the past. I'm like, I know, but things change. So no, I do like that. So what you're saying? Need the chat. So reoffenders, addicts mindset to flight or fright. It's getting the understanding from a very early age. It really is. Not blooming, and it comes back to modeling. Veronica, I'm sure you're fully aware of that term, modeling. We model ourselves off our parents, but there's two ways to look at that. Do you become what your parents are, or do you use what your parents were as a reason not to be that way?
Yeah, and for my case, it's the latter of those. I use what my parents were and still are to not be like that. And I made that decision probably at 14, 15 years old, when I saw who my parents were, and I knew that I didn't want to be like that. At I think probably 16 years old, I had to talk my mum out of suicide on Christmas Day, and I just didn't want to be that person. And so I looked at other stuff. Now, at some point, their ways affected me, because I then still went on to struggle with depression and stress and anxiety. So they had their effect on me. But I think everything built up to that point when I then got diagnosed with it, and I decided, I've spent all these years thinking I'm not going to be like my parents, and all of a sudden, oh my God, I'm like my parents. So then that gave me, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not, I don't want to take this prescription and fulfill it before I know what these things are. So I went and learned about them. But yeah, I absolutely, people either model their parents because they want to be like them, or they model against them, if you like. So you do the opposite. So many people just go along with who their parents are, and they might, I always thought to myself that I wanted to take the good bits from my parents and be a parent to my daughter like that. But also I wanted to take the negative bits from my parents and never do that with my daughter.
Yeah.
That's, for me, we should all be perfect parents by now, for me, because if we all did that, we would all be great parents. We wouldn't be ideal, we'd still do stuff wrong, but we'd be a lot better than we are. But so many people say, oh, I hated that bit about, what my parents did, and then go and do it to their kids because they've just modeled it and followed on with it.
Yeah. It's funnily enough, I see quite a lot as well, whereas things that annoy us about other people is something that shows up in ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that focus thing again, isn't it? It's that, we're focusing on that negative thing, so it becomes part of us.
Yeah.
Veronica's just put, people listen to life experiences and the fact it's not someone preaching at them. Conversation is so important. Absolutely, conversation is absolutely important, because if you want to really get help with changing your story, talk to somebody about it who's not involved with us. Talk to one of us, Cuddy or myself or any coach or anything like that, about somebody who's not involved in it, because that somebody, if they're a professional, will tell you that your story is just a story, and they will help you to change it. That conversation, and it doesn't matter what it's about. We encourage people to talk about depression and mental health in general. We need to do that more, because that person, that professional, is there to help. You go to the doctors if you hurt your leg. Well, why wouldn't you go to somebody who can help you if that's hurting up there, or if your heart's hurting? Why wouldn't you do that? You need to have that conversation, because that person is going to tell you the truth about your story, and they're going to help you to change it. I can't stress enough how much we have to keep going on about giving people conversation. You know, I've said it before. One of my goals is to have a platform or a portal online where people can just go and talk. You know, we'll have meetings every half an hour, every hour. Doesn't matter where you are around the world. 24 hours a day, there will be a meeting. You know, within half an hour of you going online, you can click on it. You can join a meeting. Group of people who are all going through the same stuff, who can just talk and get to it. There'll be a facilitator in there. This is my absolute dream, so that people have somewhere to go, because we want people to go and talk, but then we don't give them anywhere to go and talk to. Finding coaches and therapists is easier now than it ever has been, but it's still not easy. Whereas if you can go online and do something like this in a Zoom call or something like that with 15, 20 other people, all who are sharing their current struggles, the moment you share it, you share that burden. And all of a sudden it's lighter on you and you can carry on throughout the day. It's why things like AA work so well, because they're meetings that people go to on a regular basis. They talk about their issue and then it lightens the load and they can move on. And then they can go to another meeting when the load's getting too heavy. That's my absolute dream, is to have that platform where it's available 24 hours a day for anybody to get onto. And if there's anybody out there who wants to help me make that happen, who's more technical and has more resources than me, please give me a shout, because I would love to make that happen. We can make the world such a better place by giving people a place to talk.
Yeah.
Sorry, absolutely. I went on a rant there, didn't I?
No, not at all. No, honestly, Graham, I enjoy listening to you just as much as our listeners do and things like that. But at what point, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, but at what point, because we can keep talking about the story and we keep repeating the story, at what point do you say enough's enough?
What, for the storyteller or for the coach?
For the storyteller. At what point?
Only when they're ready to, is the answer to that.
And how will they know when they're ready to change?
Usually change comes when somebody gets to a point where they go, that's it, I've had enough, I've done this and I've done this and I've done this, I have had enough. That is what I call a true decision. A decision that says, oh, you know, I want to stop smoking, as an example. And somebody, oh yeah, I want to stop smoking. And I'll say, no, you don't. Because if you just go, oh yeah, I want to stop smoking, you don't really. When you get to the point where you go, do you know what? I've had enough. I've had enough of all of the issues that it's bringing up. I've had enough. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm fed up with it. And you get ready to. That's a true decision. When you get to that decision, you'll change with the help of somebody else, more than likely, but you will change, because that's the power of a true decision. That's my answer to your question.
Love it. I love it. And that's the meanings of life, the stories we create, how to break them. But
my God, I can't believe 58 minutes has gone past already.
I don't know. It's quick. It's quick. It really is quick.
We should have 2 or 3 hours of this. I'm telling you, we'll be here. Russ would never get his station back. We'd just be chat. Oh no, hang on, Cena would kick us off.
It's such an important thing. Go on.
Yeah. Right, we've got 2 minutes left. Tell me all about Monkey Mind Relaxation and what you do and who you help.
I've been for the past year. I've been working with ladies and gentlemen. I would say that I would generally say that I work with men. That's why, but most of my clients are ladies. Most of my clients, I always tip my hat to the ladies, because they always say, do you know what, something's not working for me, and I help my clients get past anxiety and depression and low self-worth in men and women, and that's what I do.
Fantastic. And you do such an amazing job at it. I know your clients get so much benefit from. No, I'm not blowing smoke up your backside.
You're very kind.
You do an amazing job. I do my best to be very kind.
Graham, what do you do?
So the Priority Academy is I've taken it a step further. I'm not just a coach anymore. It's about training coaches and training people to help. And around the world, it's about an 80, maybe even 90% split where coaches and complementary therapists and that are female. So I'm trying to also, while I love the fact that females are getting involved in that, I want more men to get involved, because the more men we get involved, the more men will talk to men, and we'll just make a better place for them. So if you're interested in learning how to be a coach, how to be a therapist, or anything like that, then that website up there's the place to go, and we'll do it. And we've got 30 seconds left. What a great show it's been. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you, Cuddy, as I always do.
Get yourself to the website, monkeymindrelaxation.com. Get in contact. It doesn't cost anything for a chat, and then we'll see what we need to do to get you moving forward. Creating
Absolutely.
better
And we'll
stories.
see you. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for the next
I will be back in a week's
of the
time,
meanings of life. A week's time.